Olga and I want to thank LOUISA and PUTNAM and KERMIT Cole for joining us and sharing their experience. They're going to be talking about supporting families in crises, their experience with open dialogue in New Mexico and further than that, I imagine. So I would like to just mention that I met LOUISA PUTNAM through Mad in America. We're both members of Mad in America's board, together with Olga as well, Runciman, who's here with me. And after a loved one took his life some years ago on 8 psychiatric medications, LOUISA went on a quest to understand mainstream psychiatry and the alternatives available. And she has dedicated her life to this. She's a licensed family therapist and trained in open dialogue and peer-supported open dialogue. And LOUISA now works with families in mental health crisis in New Mexico, USA, where she lives. And she offers classes as well in mindfulness and support groups for parents and adult children who are or have been involved in the psychiatric system. So thank you, LOUISA, from the heart that you're here and you're going to share all your experience. And Olga can.
Yeah, and I'll introduce you, KERMIT, because I've known you for a long time as well, also through Mad in America. You've been actually one of the founding one of the people who've been founding Mad in America. You've also been really working very much in the mainstream, not the mainstream of biological psychiatry, but trying to change things in mental health. So you want to help people and bring out the message of rethinking alternatives and ways of looking at it than traditional mainstream. You bring hope. You've got so much experience. You've been the editor of Mad in America for many years. I'm the director of Mad in America's webinars, educational platform. In fact, you've been really all over the place there. You're also a family therapist trained in open dialogue, and you have also lots and lots of experience with working people in severe crises and stress and distress. So, and I know I'm so happy to have you both of you here. Yeah, so thank you and welcome.
So having said that, we now hand it over to KERMIT and LOUISA, who will have 1 hour and 10 minutes maybe to structure the workshop. And so you can let us know. We have a lot of people here with us. I'm counting 34, which is great. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for welcoming and inviting us.
We wanted to say we do invite anybody who would like to turn your camera on and be with us on screen. And everybody has the power to either see only the person who's speaking or everybody in the gallery view. So a lot of choices you can make about how to participate.
We are also in the backwoods of New Hampshire, and someone is using a chainsaw over there. Can you hear them? No, you can't. Oh, good. Okay.
It's deafening here.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you everybody who's coming, letting us see your dear faces. It means a lot to me to see you, and I encourage everybody to do that so we can be gazing at one another while we're talking. Hello, Rafaela. We know some of you very, very closely and wish we could come to know you all that way too. I found myself wondering about asking how people would feel to be asked, are you a person of lived experience, or are you a family member of someone with lived experience? And to raise your hands if you feel comfortable doing that. And I'm thinking that, thank you everyone. I'm thinking that remembering when I went to a Hearing Voices training many, many years ago, Ron Coleman asked if how many people in the room heard voices. And a few people held their hand up. And at the end of the time, he asked again, and everybody held their hand up. So I don't know whether I will ask it at the end or not, but I come to this from having a beloved son who took his life after being in the psychiatric system, and have, since he first had his first experience, I just began to study and search for better ways of responding to trauma and crises than the ones we had available in New Mexico. So I just wanted to say that I come with a lot of passion, and also still working the trauma of it all out.
I'd like to mention that LOUISA and I have a fairly unique experience, I would say, and possibly some things to offer from that uniqueness, which is that we did in fact come together in large part because of our shared interest in open dialogue. And in fact, shortly after we began to be the couple that we are, the first thing we did was go to a meeting in Tornio. And that, when we were barely ready to even acknowledge that we were together. And so that's really been our life together. And we have the experience of being basically a two-person open dialogue team. We happen to be in a position to do that, to respond to the families we respond to, often immediately, often for as long as they need, as often as they need. We've been able to do that. So we've been able to explore open dialogue in that way. What we haven't done as much of is doing it within the system.
We've tried
to do that. Yeah. And there's something we might be able to offer from that experience of really trying to work with the system that we're in, and the ways that has worked and the ways that has not worked. And I would say after all of that, the way I would summarize it is that, we've been able to be in the role of professionals. We're both licensed. But I think that at the end of the day, as we really discussed this morning, the best work we've done has been when we've showed up as who we are, which is members of families who have lost people to the psychiatric system. And when we've been able to join with families who are doing that, we've been able to be of help to the family. We've had I think we can say we have had the experience of helping some individuals who were in crisis, but working within a system where it's almost impossible for somebody not to come into contact with the psychiatric system and often absorbed into it and back in and out of it. I guess at this point, I think I can summarize it as
you are unmuted, Kermit.
I can say with confidence that we can help you as a family to be able to feel together and think together and be healthier, and that will help the person that you love. But we can't make promises about any individuals. We just can't.
There's a lot of background to that we could.
And I think a lot of that has to do with, I think, really just remembering to be humble about what we can do and what we can't do, either just because that's the reality of the world, but also because we're working within a system that's very, very, very hard to work in.
Most people that come to us have already been diagnosed and put on psychiatric drugs. So then there becomes a whole legality around that that's very tricky to work with.
I was, in watching the presentations this morning, I got to thinking and I quickly wrote something that I'd like to read. It would just take a minute. And I'm offering it hopefully because it might, for the value it might have in stimulating some thought or some conversation. And then I think soon after that, we will invite some questions and go into breakout rooms. How does that sound, everybody?
Can I say one thing before you start?
Yeah.
Where we live right now, we're in southern New Hampshire by a lake, but we normally live in the high desert of New Mexico. And I've been working there to create a sustainable edible forest in the high desert. Anyway, part of that is growing blue corn, which is native to that part of the world. And I think about how we get these seeds. We have been all given these seeds of, let's say as a metaphor, of corn to take to our countries and to our people. And some of us have a couple of seeds, some of us have a whole ear, but those seeds go and they propagate and we eat them and we embody it. And I think that, all of these discussions, what has been spoken have been so beautiful and carefully done, but we now have those seeds and we have eaten them and we are different. And we have them to bring in whatever ways, to our own families, our own relationships, and our communities. So those seeds are so precious. And tying in with what, I'll say the last part of that after you say what you say, because there's another piece to it.
Okay, well, I think this actually follows fairly well from that metaphor. So I'll just read this. As I said, I dashed this up very quickly after watching a couple of presentations. In the earlier presentation on the WHO quality of rights training, the question raised of how we bring change. This was referred to as a fight, which I respect. But I thought about the problem of joining with the family while they're in crisis and bringing something that we're thinking of as a fight, as a struggle. Because in our work, it has often seemed to us that finding ways to redefine the situation as not a crisis can paradoxically be the thing that helps to make change possible. A concern was also expressed about open dialogue becoming a tool or a technique or being incorporated and absorbed into practice as usual, losing its essential qualities. Nick Putnam spoke about open dialogue as being absorbed, stripped of its essential qualities, and the system returning it to what it was. So I got to thinking about what those essential qualities are. And one thing that came to mind is we have found that in some of the worst times, it is slowing down. It is not fixing. It's bringing our attention to what is happening now, breathing, feeling. That's what makes it possible for something new. We might not know what that is to happen. So how do we do this? Of course, we do it by showing up, by saying and meaning that we will be there as often and for as long as necessary. That's what makes it possible for people to exhale. But what makes it possible for people to inhale again? The word that comes to my mind, the word that came to my mind is Sangha. Some people might know Sangha is, the old word for a meditation community, a meditation practice community. Sangha is the word, it's a group of people whose feelings and thoughts are arising from an intentionally shared space. I would propose that we think of a family as a Sangha, people whose feelings and thoughts arise from a shared space, and that we are joining with them to become aware of this together. Louisa and I are completing the training in peer-supported open dialogue, and they've made mindfulness practice an important part of what they do. And I think that's a key addition because it helps to bridge open dialogue from Tornio, where it is a part of the community, where people are familiar with its ways and they're comfortable with it, and they experience it and they slip into it as part of a shared space, like the groundwater that they're all drinking from. And so it does not come as an alien way of thinking, and an alien way of practice, or an alien way of dealing with crisis. But without that long history in Tornio, we are challenged to bring open dialogue. And I think the pod training, the peer-supported open dialogue training is I think the incorporation of mindfulness helps to compensate for that. So one of the advantages of thinking of working with families as working with a Sangha is the fact that Sanghas, the concept of Sangha has been with us for approximately 3,000 years. Maybe it's a name for something that's been with us since we began to be human, since we began to learn through each other, since we began to see the world through each other's eyes in the form of speech and language. So what we're doing is taking our place in a long tradition of learning how to feel and think together. That's not a fight. It's not something that has to be fixed. It's been the challenge of being human since the beginning. We don't get to end that struggle. We take our turn. We take our place in this time in which we find ourselves. So as far as working with families goes, a focus on Sangha, I think, is helpful in learning to shift to a network approach. And that was, I'll just, an aside is, and this harks back to something that Nick said. I found that when Louisa and I went together to marriage and family therapy school as part of our learning how to do open dialogue. And I did have a significant moment there where I suddenly realized, oh, we're not working with two individuals who, if we manage to fix both of them, then they can have a relationship. We're working with a relationship. The relationship is our client. And if we can help the relationship, everybody benefits. I almost remember the day I realized that. So here I wrote a focus on strengthening the group's ability to feel and think together, partly because this may be the best way to help an individual, strengthening the group of which they are a part. But that's an idealistic reason. I've also experienced that we have to be humble about thinking thinking that we can save everyone. As I said before, I can confidently say to a family that we can help them be better as a family, and that may help their loved one. But without the fully elaborated and comprehensive network that open dialogue is in Tornio, we are limited in what we can do. And we are always in danger of losing someone back to the system that's in place to deal with the kinds of crisis that we have to be humble. We can't always do it. I'm choking up a little as I say that. So with that in mind, let's hear what you would all like to explore in our time together. I'm ready to write down any thoughts or questions that you have and see how we can gather together to discuss them.
Is it okay if I pick
Please.
up what you said? In New Mexico, or among the indigenous people of the country that we are living in, their land, there's a metaphor, not a metaphor, but a practice of a rainmaker. Are any of you familiar with the rainmaker? The rainmaker is someone that when there's a drought, they will come to one's village and, either build or sit in a hut and bring harmony in themselves. And then as they harmonize with the nature there and with themselves, then the rain comes. And I think of this in relation to my metaphor of the seeds that we've been given, that we're all called to be rainmakers, in the sense of embodying dialogicity. And we all know about Yako's talking and Bakhtin talking about dialogue as being the embodiment of love. And I'm remembering Yorma, who was one of our trainers in Espoo, saying, it takes a lifetime to become dialogical. So we've talked a lot about setting up structures and very important things, the work that everybody's doing, but I'm more drawn to talk about our own work and our relational work. I think maybe Zelda talked about this too, about our relationality. That I had the experience in Tornio when KERMIT and I were there. We went to a hospital family meeting and also to a home family meeting. And I had an aha there that in Tornio, they don't have to use neuroleptics. It's successful very often in resolving the crisis within that enough so that people don't go on neuroleptics because they are the neuroleptic. Meaning they have embodied the equanimity and through all the training they've been through. And this is a kind of up the alley of what Nick was saying about us needing to be well trained, whether we get that through whatever way we get it. I'm thinking of the plea to have different ways of being certified to do this, but to be able to go into a family and help to create a safe space for them to begin to unbind what's found in between takes a lot of work, internal work. And that's the Rainmaker part. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, perhaps again, but I just feel like emphasizing it is that, yeah, I went through the whole big process of getting a second master's degree, getting licensed, being a professional, all to do open dialogue, really. And I guess I said this, but it bears repeating, I think, that I really arrived at a point where I just accept that I'm doing this as a peer. I'm doing it as a community member. As hope, I'd like to aspire to be, I hope to be thought of as a wise elder. Sometimes that works. But that's important to me because I realize, all the effort that we've done to be professionals and to fix the system has been really hard and heartbreaking. And I hear that coming up in the conversations today. But when I think of it as, well, this is the work of being in the community. This is the work of being a peer. We can show up for people who are in crisis. And we have a lot of days that are filled with despair about what has happened and what is happening. But then somebody shows up with a crisis and we get to show up for them. And whatever's going on in the world and whatever other people are thinking or doing that we think should be different, what matters is what we can do right now. And I think that's open dialogue. It doesn't work by saying, thou shalt be more dialogical, or the world should be more dialogical. I think it works by saying, how do we begin a dialogue right now? Apropos of which, let's have a dialogue. Let's invite anything anybody might like to say, and eventually, if we all feel to do this, we'll go into some breakout rooms.
Michelle Goodwin had her hand up. You want to say something?
Hi, thank you for this kind of introductory dialogue. I definitely felt a lot of emotional stirring in myself listening to each of you speak, and this idea of the Rainmaker and the harmony definitely resonated. What's coming up for me in this conversation, particularly around this idea of slowing down, to tend to those thoughts and feelings, and sometimes I think that it's so hard to slow down, not only when a family is experiencing crisis, but when you're also working in a system just filled with crisis, and then in a culture or society that's in crisis. And so I don't know if you have any wisdom or any anything that each of you do to be able to kind of bring in that centering and slowness into yourselves, so you're able to kind of support a family doing that too, because for me, I think that's one of the hardest parts of this work.
We both have our own practices, and they're different. Kermit used to go and I won't tell what you do for your practice. You can tell. But we do, Michelle, we do introduce giving our attention to our breath. As I'm missing your picture now, Michelle, I'm not sure. Come back on if you can. Bringing our attention to our breath, and there is a process called heart math. If people don't know about it, I recommend it. It's a study and a practice that's really, really simple, but just by bringing our attention to our breath in the area of the heart and focusing on heart-centered emotions, the research shows that the heart rate variability changes, and that the body can go from a sympathetic response to a parasympathetic response. So we will work with families to learn how to quiet their hearts and minds, and often begin a session with that, or go, let's take some breaths together, or that's one of the simplest and also most ancient of tools, is the breath.
I've been pretty amazed the times that I've asked people, I've said, can we just stop and take a few breaths together? A lot of times at moments that I think this person's going to pick up a chair and hit me if I propose this. That's not what happens. If you do it right. I mean, it can sound, if the danger is you're saying to somebody, you know, what you're saying doesn't matter, or they might experience it as what you're saying doesn't matter. With that in mind, if you can, I found if it's possible to just gently say, let's just take a breath together. People usually are grateful for that.
But also just doing the inner doing of it also will calm the family nervous system.
Yeah. I noticed
we could do it.
Let's take a few breaths together.
Yeah, let's do it. And the good thing is you can do it anywhere you are in the world, with your eyes open or shut, with other people or by yourself.
I'll lead.
Okay.
This is also something we often do. So, okay, let's all feel ourselves sitting in our seats. Feel our bodies pressing down into the earth. Resting on the earth. Noticing our breath. The sensations of the breath. The air entering the body. Chest rising and falling. Perhaps noticing thoughts and feelings as they swirl around us. And now, taking our attention and moving it down through our chest, stomach, legs, and starting to notice all the sensations in our feet. Perhaps the feet pressing into the ground. Perhaps the toes tingling or numb or warm or cold. Noticing this whole world of sensations that were in our bodies and we were not even aware of them. And now coming back up through our legs, stomach, chest, back to the breath, back to the thoughts and feelings, noticing if perhaps they have changed even just a little bit. As we allow our attention to come back out of our bodies, along with the breath, and back into the room and joining. And sometimes we've done that in some fairly heated moments, and can really help.
One last thing, I'm aware that we didn't say, would it be all right if we did some breathing together? And I noticed that when we just leapt into the breathing, I felt like the nervous system of the group kind of went, whoop. Well, and I apologize for that.
I did look at the screen, and I took 2 or 3 nods as being permission.
Yeah.
No.
But always giving permission for people to pass
right.
is important, and I apologize for not having done that.
Yeah, I try to use the word perhaps, maybe as often as possible, just to give people permission.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Amber asks, when presenting this treatment approach to a family in crisis, what sort of language might you use to describe open dialogue versus other approaches that are often pushed on clients who are either leaving a hospitalization at a psychiatric unit that is teetering, or that is teetering on the line of being admitted to a psychiatric unit? If I might start with a response, something we've said, that I've said a lot, is when people are trying to grapple with the kinds of things we do, is think of it as dance lessons. You know, we've all gotten by, you know, going to weddings and pretending we know how to dance and mostly getting away with it. But then when you want to learn how to dance with somebody else, and you want to be able to do that and know you're not going to step on their feet, dance lessons are useful. And they involve slowing down, and it involves realizing that you don't know the steps. And it involves feeling awkward until you can learn them. And that analogy has really, I think, helped a lot of people. When I use that analogy, they tend to smile and laugh.
So you're suggesting that we're introducing polyphony.
Yeah, it's like we think we know how to talk to each other, but
listen to each other.
But we end up, we think we know how to listen, and we end up stepping on each other's toes all the time. Mm-hmm. And so open dialogue is about slowing that down, really knowing that you've heard, really knowing that you have felt heard, etc.
Safe space for presence.
Yeah.
A huge part from my perspective, and I'm curious about your perspectives, but a huge part is the PTSD of having either having the trauma stirred up and in a family member, and hence in the whole family, or originally in the family and then in the family member as the identified patient. So a lot of my focus and understanding from my own personal experience, and also my training and our working with families, is just quieting the heart, and learning to do that in a family is huge.
Yeah.
A huge teaching. Inviting your voices, please. If anybody has any, thoughts about what we've shared, or